Hello and welcome to Wingin It. So, as promised, I'm back with game 2 from my round 2 matchup from the CCCC against Kip. And yeah, as Kip went first in game 1, and this is a best of 3 series, I'll be going first here in this game 2. So we can get stuck straight into this and take a look at the starting hand. And yeah, I mean, it's not an amazing starting hand, but it's certainly workable. Obviously, the Mute Swan being the pick of the bunch. Particularly strong tray here, I think, as well. You know, the Ruddy Duck, one of those A-tier wetland birds we're all familiar with from the base game. And then a couple of new forest birds from the European expansion in the Kite and the European Robin. So certainly, with no real strong forest brown power in my hand, definitely got my eye on one of those two in the tray. So yeah, kind of at least what I'm thinking here is keep the Swan, maybe keep the Egret as well. Potentially could be an extra wetland bird. Obviously, with the Mute Swan, you can get tucks on up to 3 birds in your wetlands. So I think it's particularly important to extend that wetlands out to those 3 birds as quickly as you can, so that you're at least able to make the most of those tuck cards, as well as obviously building out some strong brown powers that either get you points or some extra cards as well for tucking under the Mute Swan. So yeah, pretty straightforward. Keep those 2 birds. I had the choice as well on the bonus card between Viticulturalist and Food of Expert. Now, I'd probably say that Food of Expert is the slightly stronger of the 2. For me, they're probably about on par. Obviously, I think Food of Expert has that higher ceiling where, in theory, you could get 10 or more points from it. But that is quite tricky to do. Whereas for me, I think Viticulturalist, getting 2 birds down, particularly with that European Robin in the tray being one of those, you're already halfway there. And yeah, 3 points for those 2 birds, pretty good. But equally, I think getting to 4 birds is very doable in most games. Plenty of strong brown powers, but also some nice big point birds at the end of the game that are going to meet this bonus card. So yeah, felt like a fairly safe pick there with the Viticulturalist. So yeah, just kind of what I'm thinking here, at least in the first few turns, is I could grab one of those 2 forest birds, but chances are that if I take the Ruddy Duck, one of those is still going to be left. And at this point, I'm not really too bothered which one I get. Obviously, the European Robin is going to be my preference, purely because it meets that bonus card, and it probably does have a slightly stronger brown power. But it does cost that little extra bit of food, so, for me, it was kind of more important to make sure I could get the Ruddy Duck and then one of those 2. So yeah, I take the Ruddy Duck there, and again, in most situations here, I think my opponent, if they are going to take one of those, they're not going to be able to take both, right? So unless they have, say, a Carolina Wren or the Brant being kind of the obvious one as well, then they're only going to be able to grab one of those 2 birds in the tray, which means I'm going to get the other one. So certainly for me, it was just a case of grab that Ruddy Duck while it was there, and then yeah, just wait and see if one of those is still available. Doesn't really matter too much which one it is. I'm going to be able to grab that. So rather surprisingly, they're both still left there. So my opponent did go for cards, but they took the red-legged partridge, which again is one of these new European expansion birds. Quite an interesting choice, I think, early in the game. Not something that I often see played too early on because, again, it's quite expensive. 3 seeds, quite difficult to get the food for that in most cases. But it has really high potential to score a lot of points. So certainly useful for me to be able to remember that my opponent's got that, because later in the game, particularly if they do build up a very strong food source, either in the grasslands or the wetlands, or particularly in the forest, then I'm going to need to be paying attention and yeah, just remember that this really strong brown power is going to come. But yeah, like I said, having the choice of the 2 there, I'm obviously going to go and grab that European Robin. So yeah, already got the food for that, having kept those 3 different food, the seed, the worm and the cherry from my starting hand. So yeah, I think it's pretty kind of straightforward for me, certainly in these first few turns. Prioritize getting that down, right? I've already got some good wetland birds. Like I said, ideally I can get all 3 of these down and really maximize getting those 3 tucks from the Mute Swan power. But certainly, at a minimum, I want to get the Mute Swan and the Ruddy Duck down. That's going to let me see lots of cards. I'm going to score points through the tucking. and then obviously see an extra card when I draw through the Mute 1 power. So yeah, my opponent playing the Brown Pelican as their opening wetland birds. Not something you see too often. I think that is one of those where I only really see it played in kind of complete desperation, where you need something as a wetland bird, or maybe you don't have a great food source. So obviously the power, you gain 3 fish from the supply, so it can be quite useful in getting a wetland set up. A lot of those wetland birds do eat fish as the food type, so yeah, certainly is a good way of getting some birds down, but it's, like I said, not something I do see played too often. But yeah, for me, I was kind of thinking here, do I keep the egret and spend 2 turns gaining food? So the European Robin power being that you can gain one of the same food types that you've already gained that turn. So if I take a seed from the bird feeder, I can gain a seed through the Robin power. And I was thinking, okay, I could spend a turn gaining a worm and then a turn gaining a seed, and then that's going to give me the 4 food I need to play both these birds. But the end of round goal and just the way this first round was kind of shaping up, it didn't feel like I had enough turns to spend 2 turns taking food and then playing all these birds. I wanted to try and compete if possible for this end of round goal, because right now my opponent, they've only got that Brown Pelican with just those 2 egg spaces on. So obviously, good chance they might get something else down. And there was another wetland bird in the tray that they did grab on the turns that they have been spending during cards. So yeah, I am kind of expecting that maybe something is going to go down, and then maybe they could spend a couple of turns laying eggs to compete for this. But certainly I wanted to put myself in a position where I could at least try and compete, and then maybe it forces them to spend an extra turn laying eggs instead of getting the forest bird down or drawing more cards, just to try and maybe slow them down a little bit. And yeah, for me, I don't think this really impacted me too much. Obviously, like I said, it would be nice to get this Ruddy Duck down before I start drawing cards, but I do still have that option of discarding the egg. I get a point back through the tuck on the Mute Swan and see an extra card. So really, I'm kind of just trying to give myself more cards to see, get that extra card cycle. And really, I think overall, I'm just looking for a forest bird to try and add to this European Robin I've got set up. So yeah, as kind of mentioned, my opponent was going for cards. They did find a nice wetland bird in the grebe and got that down. So they are looking strong for this end of round. Now, I talked about forest birds, and we've got 2 really good ones straight off the top of the deck. So Bullfinch and Nuthatch. Now, watching this back, I think that was a mistake. I think I probably should have kept the Nuthatch rather than the Bullfinch, just purely because there's a worm in the feeder. I can grab that worm, get another one with the Robin, and then that's the food I need to play both the Ruddy Duck and the Nuthatch, and then I'm away. That Bullfinch just going to take a little bit longer. None of the food I need for it is in the bird feeder right now. So I think I was maybe swayed a little bit by the bonus card. So obviously this being another cherry eating bird that is going to count for the viticulturalist. That was kind of on my mind a bit here. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out as the game goes on. But yeah, my opponent, they, like I said, got that second wetland bird down, and they have laid eggs. So they're currently at 2. I'm only at 1. For me, I know I'm going to need to lay eggs again. So I'm ideally going to get at least 1 wetland bird down, and then hopefully a forest bird, and maybe a third wetland bird as well. So I am going to need eggs to do that. So for me, I felt like this made sense here. I'm getting the eggs that I need to ultimately set up my engine that little bit quicker, but also laying them here. Yeah, it's just good for the end of round. It does kind of force my opponent's hand a little bit, because I think in most situations you're going to lay eggs here. And indeed, they do lay eggs and take the end of round. But, they wouldn't have wanted to do that. So if they could have had everything their own way, I think they would have spent that turn either drawing cards or maybe going for food or playing a forest bird. I think that's really what the kind of ideal situation would have been for them. But yeah, just kind of being forced, I guess, a little bit into that position of having to lay eggs to make sure that you get those 4 points from the end of round goal. So yeah, we go straight here into round 2. And it's kind of an interesting tray. So the yellow hammer, one of those birds where you get that extra action to play another bird at the end of each round, so long as you've taken each of the 4 actions in that round. So potentially a very strong power. I've had a few games with it that have worked really well. equally, I've had a few games with that kind of power that haven't worked so well. So definitely I'm still learning, trying to sort of adjust and make sure that, you understand how the power works and really how to maximize off it. So yeah, I've kind of left it. Obviously my opponent, they've not gone for it. It's one of those where if I get it, I'll be happy. If I don't, I'm not going to be too disappointed. I think certainly for me, the priority, just with these birds in my hand, I want to be getting this ruddy duck down, trying to draw some cards, and then I can either look to get the bullfinch down if I've got the food, or even that goshawk. I think that works pretty well as that second forest bird. And obviously, if I'm going to be drawing lots of cards, I shouldn't really have too much trouble feeding that goshawk and being able to get it down. So I'll just skip forward a couple of turns here. You'll see I got the ruddy duck down, I went for cards, and I did grab the yellow hammer. So yeah, like I said, was certainly one I was looking to grab if possible, but I wasn't going to lose too much sleep if that wasn't an option available to me. So yeah, another good bird I think as well in the tree swallow that I managed to pick up. So that is certainly one that I can look to play. It's going to work well with this wetland setup. I'm already getting some tucks with the mute swan, so that's just going to add to that, and it helps with the bonus card as well. So certainly one I can look to play. Really, I was kind of hoping to get some slightly weaker birds. One of those odd situations where I wanted to play the goshawk, but I didn't want to waste these good birds on that. So you see I go for cards here again, and a really good pickup here in the chipping sparrow. That was kind of a dream scenario here to grab that. I've already got the food, got the seed for it. Pretty easy to get that down. It's going to function really nicely as that second forest bird, and it's going to be an egg source. Right now, really the one thing missing from my setup is a way to get eggs. I don't really want to be going into that grasslands and just laying 2 eggs a time. That is really, really slow. So yeah, kind of thinking here, working out, okay, which of these birds am I not going to work with? I think the bee eater is ordinarily a really strong choice, but again, just really with the lack of grassland options here, and not really having the kind of setup to make that work, particularly if I'm going to go for this chipping sparrow, I felt like it was the right decision there to tuck it. And yeah, kind of pretty happy with this hand still. Kind of still struggling to justify playing this goshawk, but certainly, like I said, now I've got my hands on this chipping sparrow, I can be pretty happy with that. So I think pretty clear for me. I'm going to get that down straight away. So yeah, no messing about on that next turn. Straight away, get the chipping sparrow down. Now I know when I go for food, I'm going to be getting 3 foods. So I think especially with the cherry and the bird feeder, I'm going to look to grab that. Hope I can get a worm on the reroll, and then try and get this tree sparrow down as quickly as possible. And then yeah, from there, pretty straightforward. Just start drawing cards. I'm going to be getting a tuck under the tree sparrow, and then another 3 from the mute swan. So as a 4-point activation in the wetlands, it's going to be really, really strong for me. Just help me see more cards. And there we go. We do get the worm on the reroll, which is very, very nice. And of course, the egg as well from the chipping sparrow. So yeah, pretty straightforward. Try and get this tree sparrow down, start drawing cards, and then if I do get some less desirable cards, shall we say, then that's going to be my way of getting the goshawk down. So very, very nice, certainly. Just on my opponent, they start to get their wetlands set up pretty nicely as well. So you see they already had the piebald grebe that they played early in the game, and then did manage to add this white-throated dipper as well at some point during this round. So yeah, they've got themselves a pretty nice setup. Intriguingly as well, you'll see they played the Eurasian cream woodpecker. So one of these teal powers that counts double for each of the end of round goals. Not something you'd normally see played, but considering these end of round goals, it was almost the perfect bird for them. It's going to count for all 3 of these remaining end of round goals. And yeah, I mean, if that even just gives you an advantage in one of them, I think they can be worth playing. So certainly if you can get 2, or as I said in this case, 3 end of round goals where it's going to qualify for, and you get that extra advantage there, that just puts you in a really strong position. So certainly, yeah, I'm going to be up against it. I think this second end of round is certainly out of reach, and yeah, it is going to be difficult to try and compete in these other 2 as well. So we'll see. I have got a couple of cavity nests and obviously some more forest birds in my hand that I might look to play, but only time will tell if I am actually able to compete with what my opponent's got set up here. So we flash ahead again to my next turn, and yeah, like I said, I think my original plan here was to play the tree sparrow. Now obviously have got the food for that. However, during that previous turn of my opponent, my plan kind of changed a little bit, and I was thinking, right, I can get this bullfinch down, and then that's going to help get me the food to play the tree sparrow, potentially the bluebird, and then anything else I might pick up next round. So obviously now, if I do have those extra cards, I can ditch one of those. I can get 3 foods, plus a 4th from the bullfinch, and then a 5th from the European robin. So you see, that's exactly what I'm doing here on this turn. I'm going for the food. Really annoying reroll, not getting the worm I needed. So that was a little bit of Wingspan laughing in my face, having just overpaid for that bullfinch with 2 worms. I then don't get any on the reroll, which is a big shame. You know, I would ideally have managed to get 1, and then, you know, maybe copied that with the robin so I could get 2 when I'm looking to play this tree sparrow and bluebird. But there you go. That's the game for you. Sometimes the bird feeder likes to mess with you. But in the end, you know, I'm still going to look to try and get this tree sparrow down. And like I said, it's really important for me to do that and just start drawing cards and get all those extra tucks, not only through the tree sparrow itself, but through the mute swan. So yeah, just that ability to score more points and see more cards, really, really vital for this wetlands. And so we skip forward again a couple of turns. You see I did get the tree swallowed down. I had to overpay, as mentioned, which was a shame, but it was so important for me to get that down. So here we go. It's time to start drawing some cards. You see I did kind of have my eye on that pleated woodpecker. I was thinking about playing it, and then I picked it up and thought it's just going to be a denial. You know, I think it was just such a strong card for my opponent. They already had all the cavity nests. They didn't really have an egg source, so it was one of those, yeah, like I say, I could have played it, but I think then I'm giving eggs to my opponent, and I want to avoid doing that if at all possible. So yeah, not the best pickups. I think something like that white-throated swift could potentially work, but you see I'm not really generating the sort of cards I need to really make that work. So you know, I'm drawing 2, and then I draw another 2, the ruddy duck, but then I'm tucking 3 behind the mute swan and drawing 1. So you know, I'm tucking away kind of most of the cards I'm drawing, and then obviously have to discard 1 as well through the ruddy duck. So at the moment, this wetlands is only actually generating 1 net card a turn. So trying to use that to feed something like a white-throated swift is just so difficult to do. So yeah, kind of here I'm deciding, do I work with what I've got, or do I go digging again? And I think this is a case where I learned from my mistakes in the last game. So if you haven't seen game 1, definitely recommend checking that out now. But yeah, kind of the big takeaway from that was, if you've got a strong wetlands that lets you see lots of cards, but also gain points while doing so, you know, don't settle for mediocre birds. If you can afford that extra turn or 2, digging through the deck, scoring points through the tucks, and yeah, really trying to find those birds you want to play, then absolutely you should be doing that. And I think it's paid off here. I've got some good pulls. I think the trumpeter swan is going to be a really nice big point bird I can look to play. But this cowbird as well could come into play. So one of the points I mentioned right back at the start of this video, my opponent, they grabbed that red-legged partridge, and I have a feeling that this is kind of the moment where they're trying to set that up. They've got 2 birds in that second column which have a lot of egg capacity, which is very important if you're running that red-legged partridge, to try and make sure you've got the space for it. And there we go, straight away next turn they get that down. So really, as soon as I see that, I'm panicking and I'm rushing to get the foods so that I can get this cowbird down. Obviously, I could have played it on that last turn. I did have the seed, but what I'm thinking here is I'd really like to get it down as a double play with this mountain bluebird. So the bluebird is going to be my final viticulturalist bird, so that's going to get me up to the 7 points. Really, really important for me to do that. I do have an egg, and then obviously I've got another one here through the chipping sparrow power. So yeah, I've got 2 eggs. I can play these birds, lose 1, but I'm still going to have 1 down to at least qualify, hopefully, for this end of round goal. So yeah, pretty good turn gaining food. I've got the food here to play this bluebird into cowbird double play, but then also I'm going to have the exact 3 foods I need to play the trumpeter swan. So I'm kind of working out my end game here. I'm thinking I do the double play, I make sure I get a free egg from the cowbirds, and then I can look to get the swan down and just start drawing cards. So really, it's one of those where when you go into the final round, you've got to work out where your points are coming from. And for me, it's not the grasslands here. You know, I only get 3 eggs when I take the lay eggs action. But if I'm going to go for cards, I'm going to be getting a tuck on the swallow, and then another 3 on the swan. So that's 4 points. All the while, it's giving me the chance to dig through the deck. And, maybe I get lucky. Maybe I find a Benelli's Eagle, and then I can play that in the final round for big points. So you've always got to try and plan out, and you've got to think, right, where are the points coming from in this final round? And yeah, like I said, for me, it's all going to be in that wetland. So now I've got this cowbed down, and I've seen that my opponent's got this big grassland set up. I can expect some eggs to come my way pretty soon. And obviously plenty of bowl nest space to lay that into as well. So yeah, here we go into this final round. Probably not the best score at this stage. You'll see I had a little sneaky peek there, only 46 points. So certainly is on the lower end. And yeah, kind of one reason behind that is just these end of round goals. I'm getting absolutely crushed. That Eurasian green woodpecker is really carrying at the moment in those end of round goals, just making it so difficult for me to compete for those. And I think as well in this last one, I'm up to 3 birds in the forest. My opponent, they've got 2, but that woodpecker counts double, so they're effectively at 3 as well. They only need 1 more to be able to take over and snatch this final end of round goal as well. So with no real forest bird in sight, and certainly even if I do manage to draw one, it's going to have to be something like the goshawk I found earlier, ideally Benelli's Eagle that could go up there, because I just don't have the food, and I don't really want to be spending a turn gaining food when it's not going to score me points in this late game. So yeah, like I said, I'm just kind of praying, hoping, waiting that I can get this free egg, so that I can get this one down, and yeah, hopefully just start drawing some cards from there and scoring points. So we skip ahead here to my next turn, and you will see my opponent did not lay eggs. They went for cards, so yeah, that put me in a tricky position, because at this point I have to work out, is it worth me laying eggs, or is it worth me waiting, not laying eggs, expecting that I am going to get a free egg, and then play the swan? Because, like I said, laying eggs is not my best action here. It only gets me 3 points through 3 eggs, whereas drawing cards is going to get me 4 points through 4 tuck cards. And so many of these games can come down to a single point, either way or the other. So, even just slipping and missing 1 point in this final round can often come back to bite you and cost you in the game. So, yeah, I do put off the laying eggs again. I do draw the cards, so I do already get those 4 points. I don't need to play the swan first. I can already get the 4 tuck cards. Really, it's just kind of a bit of a standoff at this point, and kind of waiting and hoping, like I said, that I can get the free egg, because I really don't want to be laying eggs here myself, if I can at all avoid it. And I know my opponent, they've drawn birds, maybe they're going to go for food and play some birds. But, I look at their setup and I think your strongest action here has to be laying eggs. You get 3 eggs and another 3 through the partridge itself. So many egg spaces on the birds above and below. So, yeah, I'm certainly just waiting, hoping that a free egg comes my way, because I really don't want to be laying eggs myself. And we flash forward once again, and it's another turn of not laying eggs. My opponent playing the forest bird, so kind of like I alluded to earlier, certainly was expecting some kind of forest play at some point to compete for the end of round. It's a slightly unusual one. I'm kind of assuming at this point it's for a bonus card, because those are 2 pretty low point birds to be playing late in the game. They're not really going to help too much in terms of point scoring, unless, like I say, they do help for a bonus card. So yeah, at this point I am kind of thinking, is it worth playing the red kite? I was already thinking about it as an option, the ruddy duck being the natural choice here, because it hasn't got any point value. Now I play the red kite and immediately lose all of those tuck cards under the ruddy duck, and that was a big shock for me, because that is not supposed to happen. The rules say that if you play red kite on top of a bird that has tuck cards, you keep those tuck cards. But then obviously also the bird you played on top of it becomes a tuck card. Now that did happen. You'll see the red kite does have that 1 tuck card being the ruddy duck, but all those extra tuck cards underneath it, gone. So I was really worrying at that point, because, like I said before, my points, they weren't really that strong at the end of the 3rd round. And I've just lost like 5 or 6 points there that I should have had from those tuck cards. And I talk about games sometimes being decided by a single point. If you're throwing away 5 or 6 points like that, you really are just making things hard for yourself in terms of trying to compete for a win. So yeah, definitely nervous, definitely sweating. This was not a bug I was aware of. I'm not sure my opponent was aware of it either, but it is one of those where you have to deal with bugs. Kind of, we've said it on the tournament's Discord, it's unfortunate that these bugs come up. But I wasn't really prepared to ask my opponent for a restart here. You know, with 3 turns left, it's not exactly fair to put them in a position and say, I've missed some points here, we need to restart. That wasn't, you know, at all a thought that went through my mind. It was more just about the frustration of having to lose those tuck cards. So yeah, like I say, I'm just kind of waiting and praying and hoping that that doesn't come back to bite me. But knowing this strong point scoring grass and setup that my opponent has got, I'm certainly expecting lots of eggs to go down. So sooner rather than later, hopefully I can get a free egg here and try and play this Trumpeter Swan. But you'll see yet again, it's another turn of not laying eggs. So I was really kind of curious here as to what my opponent was planning on doing with all the cards and all this food they've got. But one thing was for sure, I couldn't mess about waiting for them to lay eggs again, because if I wait too long and they don't lay eggs at all, I'm not going to be able to play this Trumpeter Swan. And this Trumpeter Swan is worth 7 points for me. So, like I said before, in the final round especially, you need to see where the points are coming from. I have a 3-point grasslands, I have a 4-point wetlands, but I have a 7-point bird in my hand. So I absolutely have to be playing this Trumpeter Swan. And yeah, I just needed those 2 eggs there to get it down. So now it's pretty clear for me, you know, whether I get the eggs or not from this cowbird, I'm going to have to be playing this Trumpeter Swan for 1 turn, and then drawing cards for the other turn, and just taking those tuck card points. So yeah, not the strongest of end games, but sometimes you just have to make the best of the position you forced yourself into. And so we jump forward once again for the final time in this game to the last turn. So as mentioned, played the Trumpeter Swan on the previous turn, and then it's just a straightforward turn drawing cards. It really doesn't matter what I draw, just speed through this, get the cards drawn, get them tucked, so we can hopefully move on, forget about this game, and yeah, just pray that we can still snatch the win. So do have my opponent just to do their round end power. We lose another end of round goal, so it's a clean sweep for my opponent, and we go here into the score. So yeah, like I mentioned, really wasn't feeling good about this. Obviously the points weren't there going into the final round, and then managed to lose quite a lot through that bug as well. So decent lead after birds and bonus cards, but just that huge score on the end of round goals, difficult to compete with. Only 3 eggs combined between the 2 of us, a few cash food, and then fortunately all those tuck cards at the end do get me over the line. So pretty low scoring game all in all, but we do take the win, 71 points to 63. Yeah, like I said, not the most vintage game of Wingspan you will ever watch, but a win is a win. Winning when you're not playing at your best is so important, because this is a tough game. You know, not every game is going to go perfectly, is going to go exactly how you wanted, but still being able to squeeze out those wins in the end is what counts. And especially in a tournament format like this, where we have a best of 3 series and we lose the first one, you've got to win that second game no matter what. So we do tie the series at 1-1, and we go into a decider against Kip. So stay tuned for that. That video will be coming in a few days' time. But in the meantime, thank you very much for watching. If you aren't subscribed to the channel, please do, so you can stay up to date with the final game of the series and future gameplay content as well.